Hey guys, today I'll show you a science fiction thriller TV series named Misfits Season 3. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. At the end of last season, a mysterious drug dealer named Seth appeared in town, specializing in buying and selling superpowers. The main gang sold off their powers to him, but right after they did, a robbery went wrong, and Curtis's girlfriend was killed. Without his powers, Curtis was powerless to save her. It was only then that everyone realized just how important their abilities had been. They tracked down the mastermind, got revenge for Curtis's girlfriend, and even managed to walk away with a hefty sum of money, enough to buy themselves brand new powers. The story kicks off with a new male lead, Rudy, trying to sell his own powers to Seth. Just as Seth is about to meet him, Rudy suddenly bolts after someone. They race all the way up to the rooftop, and when the person turns around, it's another Rudy. It turns out Rudy's superpower is duplication, but his clone has a mind of its own and refuses to listen to him. Rudy originally planned to have Seth remove the power, but at the last minute, his clone ruined everything. The two of them got into a fight right there on the rooftop, and in the scuffle, they both tumbled over the edge. Luckily, they landed on a lower platform and finally calmed down. The clone reabsorbed back into Rudy. After sorting that out, Rudy remembered he still had business to take care of, his community service at the rehabilitation center. He's a juvenile offender, and his probation officer just so happens to be Sean. In his work group are also two girls, Lady Bro and Tanya. Rudy, being the shameless flirt he is, invites the girls out for a drink after their shift. Meanwhile, the others who got new powers at the end of last season have been dealing with their own situations. After a lot of practice, Simon has become a parkour pro, but just as he attempts his first major leap between rooftops, he gets a sudden flash of himself falling. Looks like his new power is the ability to foresee the future. Kelly, on the other hand, has become a rocket science whiz, mastering all kinds of complex rocket knowledge. She thought this would land her a cushy job at a top company, but the interviewers just couldn't believe a teenage delinquent like her could design such intricate rocket blueprints. One day, the gang is hanging out at Simon's future house, catching up. To celebrate Kelly's latest job hunting fail, they decide to hit the bar for some drinks. At the bar, Kelly suddenly asks about Nathan. Alicia tells her that Nathan and his girlfriend have moved to Las Vegas and are living the good life, all cozy and settled down. Just then, Rudy shows up at the bar with the two sexy girls in tow. Alicia looks a little awkward when she sees Rudy, quickly making an excuse about being tired and dragging Simon out with her. Clearly, there's some hormone history between Alicia and Rudy. While waiting for drinks, Tanya steps outside for a smoke, giving Rudy the perfect chance to flirt with Lady Bro. But Lady Bro isn't having any of it. Frustrated, Rudy heads to the bathroom to cool off, only for his clone to sneak out again. They hatch a plan. Rudy will keep chasing after Lady Bro while his clone lays low. As luck would have it, when the clone steps outside, he runs into Tanya. Unlike Rudy, the clone is more gentle and thoughtful, exactly Tanya's type. Tanya starts thinking Rudy might actually like her, so she even sneaks off to touch up her makeup. But when she comes back, she catches Rudy making out with Lady Bro right in front of her. Furious, Tanya's anger triggers her own superpower, Time Freeze. It turns out Tanya is a super too. Whenever she gets mad, she can freeze everyone around her. At that moment, Curtis was just about to deliver drinks to Rudy. Tanya snatches a bottle, smashes it over Rudy's head, and even shoves the broken half back into his hand. When time unfreezes, Rudy thinks it was Curtis who attacked him, and they get into a muscle wrestling right there in the bar. A few days later, while Curtis, Simon, and Kelly are hanging out, they bump into Rudy again. Rudy casually brags to Tanya about hooking up with Lady Bro. Tanya, furious all over again, freezes him in place and shoves him down the stairs. As fate would have it, Curtis and his friends were just at the bottom of the steps. As soon as Rudy stands up, Tanya freezes the whole group again. But she doesn't stop there. She even frames them for smashing up a police car. Chaos breaks out, and the cops start chasing them. They all scatter, but the cops zero in on Curtis. Luckily, he uses his new power, the ability to transform into a woman, and manages to slip away unnoticed. After reuniting with the group, Curtis didn't want to reveal their superpower secret in front of a stranger, so he spoke in code. But Rudy picked up on the hidden meaning right away and came clean to everyone. He was a superpowered person too. Only then did the group relax. They brought Rudy to Simon's secret hideout for a bit of rest. While there, Rudy spotted a photo of Alicia and Simon together, and his expression changed dramatically before he rushed out. Back home, Rudy dug out an old photo of Alicia. It turns out he used to have feelings for her too, back when Alicia was a heartbreaker who seriously hurt him. Meanwhile, Rudy also discovered that Tanya had framed him. As revenge, he secretly planted a donation box inside Tanya's locker. When Sean found it, he immediately called the police. But just as Tanya was being loaded into the cop car, she unleashed her power in anger, froze the police officers, and made a clean escape. Meanwhile, Rudy was back at the bar trying to pick up girls. That's when Alicia showed up. The moment Rudy saw her, he lost control of his powers again. His clone popped out, scaring Lady Bro half to death. The clone, being much more emotional and sentimental, couldn't move on from Alicia. Without thinking, he blurted out all the messy details, their one-night stand, Alicia's messy love life, and how he'd almost taken his own life over her. Alicia thought Rudy was absolutely nuts and dragged Simon out of the bar. Later that night, Rudy was woken up by the sound of the TV. It was his clone who had come looking for him. They both realized things couldn't keep going like this. Rudy admitted that having the clone around was wrecking his life. Every time his clone showed up, he would drag up painful memories from the past. Rudy suggested that his clone move away and live somewhere else. After some convincing, the clone agreed. The next day, the clone was packing his bags, ready to leave. Feeling freed from the burden of his clone, Rudy saw an opportunity. He planned to hook up with Lady Bro in the locker room, but just as things were heating up, Tanya suddenly appeared. She was there for revenge. In a rage, she unleashed her power, killed Lady Bro, and staged the scene to frame Rudy as the murderer. As luck would have it, Alicia showed up at that exact moment, planning to apologize to Rudy for the hurt she'd caused him. Instead, she walked right into the scene of the setup. Tanya captured both of them, tied them up, and tried to stage their deaths as a double suicide out of guilt. At that critical moment, Alicia activated her new power. She was able to see through Tanya's perspective and realized she was faking their suicide notes. Alicia quickly caught on to Tanya's whole plan. When Tanya came back to finish the job, Rudy didn't hold back. He distracted her with conversation, then launched a powerful kick. Tanya's head smashed against the floor, knocking her out cold, but the force of the kick also knocked over Rudy's chair. Thankfully, he managed to hook his legs around Alicia's body and stop himself from being strangled, though now Alicia was struggling to hold them both up. In that life-or-death moment, Alicia sincerely apologized to Rudy. Hearing it, Rudy finally let go of his anger. He loosened his legs, letting himself pass out from the rope. A while later, Rudy woke up. It turned out his clone had sensed something was wrong and rushed in just in time to save them both. Since the crime scene was stacked against them, the gang decided they had no choice but to bury the body. Honestly, for this crew, handling situations like this had become second nature. As a thank you, Rudy took everyone for a joyride. But they hadn't gone far before the cops started tailing them. It turns out, Rudy had stolen the car. In the end, Simon and the others, who had only just gotten out, found themselves right back at the rehabilitation center. Officer Sean greeted them with a smirk and welcomed them home. After leaving, Nathan ended up in Las Vegas. His new power was magic. With his supernatural sleight of hand, he was raking in cash at the casinos, but he got too cocky. During one game, he accidentally changed a 6-sided die to show a 7. The casino finally caught him cheating and threw him straight back in jail. The scene shifts to the women's track team training in the community. After watching them run, Curtis's competitive spirit kicked in, and remembering his new ability to change gender at will, he decided to sneak in and try running himself. Once on the track, he quickly left the other athletes behind, astonishing the coach with his strength and speed. Impressed, the coach invited him to join the track team, but Curtis had to politely decline for fear of exposing his secret. Later, while changing in the locker room, Curtis was approached by a pretty girl named Emma, who was intrigued by his incredible performance. She wanted to get to know him better, but not wanting things to escalate, Curtis quickly made his exit. Just as he was leaving the rehabilitation center, Sean suddenly appeared and tried to strike up a conversation. Afraid of revealing his identity, Curtis simply left without saying a word. That night, after changing back to his male form at the bar, Curtis ran into Emma again. She was still taken with him, and they began talking about his time on the track team. As expected, their conversation eventually turned to more intimate topics, and they made plans to meet at Emma's place later for a smelly workout. The next day, while in his female form again for a run, Curtis bumped into Emma, and the awkwardness was unavoidable. Emma started venting about their disastrous date the night before. She complained that Curtis had been so negative the whole time, constantly complaining about life. Feeling sorry for him, she had reluctantly agreed to work out with him, but she was shocked by how short his smelly sausage was and how bad his yoga skills were. Curtis, feeling utterly humiliated, quickly left the track. Back at the rehabilitation center, Curtis asked Alicia for confirmation about his 2-minute hormone skills. Alicia didn't want to tell him, but after he made some dismissive remarks about Simon, she finally gave in and told him the truth. His skills were so bad that even Simon could do better. This left Curtis questioning everything about himself. A few days later, Emma invited Curtis to a dance, but he didn't have an appropriate dress. Emma offered to lend him one, but when Curtis tried it on, he couldn't zip it up. Just as he was struggling, Simon walked in. Not recognizing Curtis in his female form, Simon assumed she was stealing something. Fortunately, Curtis managed to explain the situation, and Simon zipped her dress up for her greasy body. Unbeknownst to them, Kelly had witnessed the whole thing. That night at the dance, Curtis and Emma became increasingly attracted to each other, getting closer as the night went on. The next day, Curtis confessed to Simon that he'd slept with Emma while in his female form. He explained that being with Emma as a woman felt incredibly comfortable, and the pleasures of being a woman were just so much more intense than being a man. Now Curtis was torn. He wasn't sure if he should come clean to Emma or keep their secret, fearing it might ruin their relationship. Later that afternoon, while training, Curtis pulled a muscle and was sitting in the locker room massaging his leg. The coach saw him and took the opportunity to offer a hand massage of his own, gradually moving his hands inappropriately. Even Curtis, usually oblivious, realized something was off and quickly made an excuse to leave. Sure enough, at the dance later, the coach secretly drugged Curtis's drink. After she drank it, she soon felt disoriented. Luckily, Emma was there and thought she was just drunk, so she helped her to the locker room to rest and went to call a ride for her. However, Rudy, who was also in the locker room, happened to be there at that moment. In her haze, Curtis mistook Rudy for Emma, and they ended up tangling their muscles together. When Emma returned, she saw Rudy tongue-massaging Curtis and assumed she was being cheated on. Enraged, she stormed off. Curtis finally came to his senses and realized something was wrong. He tried to chase after Emma, but in the hallway he bumped into the coach, who promised to help him find Emma, but instead drove him to the underground parking lot. There, he planned to take advantage of her while she was unconscious. In a moment of desperation, Curtis switched back to his male form and woke up just in time. The coach was stunned to realize this girl was actually a guy, and before he could react, Curtis punched him out cold. The scene shifts to Curtis back at home. After Emma left the dance, heartbroken, she somehow found her way to his place. She wanted to sleep with him to get back at the female Curtis for being unfaithful. Understanding the situation, Curtis refused, not wanting to take advantage of her. Seeing Curtis's genuine side made Emma develop stronger feelings for him. However, while looking around, she found the dress she had lent him under the bed and quickly realized there was more to the story, that Curtis had been involved with the female version of himself. Furious, Emma stormed out. The next day, Curtis poured his heart out to Simon about everything that had happened. After hearing the story, Simon just stared at him, completely dumbfounded. Emma, thinking he was basically dating himself, was just too much to process. Simon couldn't come up with any real advice either. Clearly, this was a mess that would take some serious time to untangle. Later, after Curtis had shifted back into his female form, the coach approached him again, asking her to just forget everything that had happened the night before. Curtis, knowing full well that the coach had drugged him, didn't bother arguing. He had bigger priorities, like finding Emma and making things right. Meanwhile, just as Curtis was talking with Simon, Kelly happened to catch them together. Misunderstanding the situation, she assumed Curtis was trying to steal Alicia's boyfriend. While Curtis was changing in the locker room, Kelly cornered her, angrily accusing her of seducing Simon. Their argument quickly drew the attention of the warden and a bunch of others. A crowd gathered, everyone ganging up on Curtis, not giving her a chance to explain. Just then, Emma walked in. Hearing everyone's accusations, she felt completely betrayed. Without giving Curtis a chance to speak, she slapped her across the face and stormed out of the locker room. Watching his relationship fall apart right in front of him, Curtis finally lost it. He let loose, cursing out everyone around him, especially Sean and Rudy, who had taken advantage of him earlier. But just as things reached peak chaos, Curtis's period unexpectedly started. The room instantly fell into awkward silence. Seizing the moment, Sean quietly slipped away while Curtis rushed into the bathroom to deal with his diabetic blood. Finally, Simon managed to explain to everyone that the girl they were accusing was actually Curtis. The news hit the crowd like a bombshell. Rudy, remembering how he had gotten a little too close with Curtis the night before, looked like he was about to puke. Trying to ease the awkwardness, Kelly decided to help Curtis with her blood situation. After sorting herself out, Curtis made up his mind to find Emma and come clean about everything. But when he got to her room, she wasn't there. Her teammates told him she had gone drinking with the coach. Knowing exactly what kind of guy the coach was, Curtis rushed out to find her. Sure enough, he found the coach back at the underground parking lot just as he was about to assault an unconscious Emma. Furious, Curtis dragged him out of the car and beat him to a pulp. When Emma eventually woke up, Curtis was there waiting for her. Face to face with Emma, Curtis told her the whole truth. The coach had drugged him, and he and her girlfriend were actually the same person. When Emma didn't believe his smelly bullshit, Curtis demonstrated his gender-swapping ability on the spot. Only then did Emma finally understand. Neither version of Curtis had lied to her. Relieved and emotional, the two took a walk around the field. Emma was stunned by Curtis's ability but understood why he had disguised himself to join the track team. It was his only shot at running again. With Emma's encouragement, Curtis finally realized that running wasn't his only purpose in life. It was time to move on and embrace a new beginning. As for the coach, they left him naked and tied up in the middle of the track field, his crimes written all over his body for everyone to see. After that, he never had the chance to hurt another girl again. The scene shifts to Simon darting across rooftops and alleyways, moving like a shadow through the city. After months of intense training, he'd become a parkour expert. Just as he was wrapping up his routine, Simon spotted a mugging happening nearby. Righteous to the core, he couldn't just stand by and watch. However, being his first time trying to play the hero, Simon ended up injuring his hand during the scuffle with the burly thief. Luckily, his training kicked in and he managed to fight the guy off. The victim turned out to be Peter, a comic book fan. Thinking he'd just been saved by a real-life superhero, Peter excitedly tried to snap a photo with Simon, but Simon, flustered, took off before he could. Back home, Alicia noticed Simon's injured hand. Fearing he would only get himself hurt again, she begged him to give up this superhero nonsense. But Simon, still riding the high from his first real act of justice, couldn't bring himself to promise her that. A few days later, a new batch of juvenile offenders arrived at the rehabilitation center, Peter among them. During a bathroom break, Peter noticed Simon's hand injury and immediately connected the dots. Simon was the masked hero who had saved him. Simon begged him to keep it a secret. Unfortunately, that's when Rudy barged into the bathroom, only to see Simon and Peter standing awkwardly close, holding each other's circumcised cigar. Rudy jumped to conclusions and decided the two were lovers. Simon tried to explain, but Rudy didn't want to hear a word of it. Simon could only hope he wouldn't blab to everyone. Later, back at home, Peter couldn't contain his excitement. He drew a comic strip about Simon's heroic exploits. But something strange happened. The next day, when they met again, Simon's attitude toward Peter had completely changed. He treated Peter like a best friend, even sharing all his dreams and plans for the future. Deeply touched, Peter rushed home and turned Simon's stories into even more comics. As the days went by, their bond grew stronger. Simon even brought Peter back to his hideout, something Alicia had strictly forbidden. Alicia returned to find Peter there and was furious. She didn't want outsiders discovering their secret base and demanded Peter leave immediately. As Peter left, he wore a strange, thoughtful look on his face. The next morning, while making breakfast, Simon suddenly announced he wanted to break up. Alicia was blindsided. Simon explained coldly that he had important things to do and couldn't afford distractions like love right now. Before walking out, he told Alicia she would understand why one day. Then he closed the door, leaving Alicia sobbing on the other side. It turns out, Peter was no ordinary kid. He had powers, too. Whatever he draws in his comics becomes reality. Meanwhile, back at the rehabilitation center, Rudy was caught by Officer Sean while swapping places with his identical double. Thinking on his feet, Rudy claimed they were twin brothers. Sean didn't care, as long as someone showed up to do the work. Later that day, Alicia told everyone about her breakup with Simon, still confused about the real reason. Rudy, ever the gossip, shared his theory that Simon had fallen for Peter. Alicia was horrified and refused to believe it. Determined to get answers, she stormed off to find Simon. At the center, she caught Simon and Peter laughing together. When Simon stepped away, Alicia cornered Peter, accusing him of stealing her boyfriend. Smirking, Peter told her bluntly that one can't be a superhero and have a girlfriend. She should just give up on Simon. Furious at his smugness, Alicia shoved Peter against the wall. His sketchbook fell to the ground, flipping open to a page showing Simon breaking up with her, complete with identical dialogue to what had actually happened. Being exposed, Peter panicked and bolted. Meanwhile, Kelly was starting a new romance of her own. One day, the car of Seth, the drug dealer in superpowered goods, broke down on the road. Kelly, using her rocket engineering skills, helped fix his ride. Grateful, Seth gave her a lift, and hormone sparks began to fly between them. Not long after, they ran into each other again at a bar. Seth bought her a drink, and the chemistry between them grew. But just as things were heating up, Alicia barged in and dragged Kelly away. She had a score to settle. Gathering the others, Alicia led a mission to confront Peter. Cornered, Peter made a break for it, and the group chased him down a dead-end alley. That's when Simon suddenly showed up, and without hesitation, he beat the living daylights out of Curtis and the others. Of course, this was all part of Peter's plan, carefully drawn out in his comics. Even the way the group collapsed onto the ground matched the comic panels exactly. After things temporarily settled down, Kelly went to find Seth again. She apologized for leaving so abruptly last time and invited him out for a drink at the bar, but Seth turned her down. His distant, hot and cold attitude left Kelly feeling a little frustrated. After a moment's hesitation, Seth opened up about his past. Before gaining his superpowers, Seth had been a drug dealer. One time, he gave his girlfriend a large amount of illegal drugs, which led to her overdosing and dying. It was a guilt that had haunted him ever since. Even now, he couldn't bring himself to start a new relationship. So, despite appreciating Kelly's kindness, all Seth could do was quietly apologize and walk away. Meanwhile, Alicia wasn't ready to give up. After her earlier failure, she used her powers to spy on Simon, and what she saw made her blood boil. Simon and Peter were at her house, laughing together over comic books. It felt like a betrayal right to her face. Unable to hold back any longer, Alicia gathered her friends and stormed over to Peter's house. They kicked down the door, setting off the alarm in the process. Luckily, Kelly took one look at the circuit board and easily disabled it. Once inside, they found the walls plastered with comics that mirrored reality exactly. Alicia figured if they destroyed the comics, maybe they could break Peter's hold over Simon. Without hesitation, they tore every page to shreds. Sure enough, Simon heard the tearing sounds echoing in his mind. As Alicia finished ripping up the last piece, Simon finally snapped out of his trance. When Alicia returned home, Simon broke down in tears, begging her not to leave him. He confessed he never wanted to break up in the first place. Alicia explained everything, that it had all been Peter manipulating him. Furious at being played, Simon went to confront Peter. But by now, Peter was completely lost in his superhero fantasy. In his eyes, Alicia was the villain standing in the way of Simon's destiny. He insisted that Simon was meant to become a superhero and that everything he had done was to help him. Simon firmly rejected him. He didn't need that kind of help. He wanted to live his life naturally. With that, he turned his back on Peter and walked away. Life returned to a peaceful rhythm for a while. Simon thought Peter had finally given up, but it turned out the calm was only the prelude to a bigger storm. One day, a figure dressed just like Simon kidnapped Alicia and left a message challenging Simon to come save her. The kidnapper, of course, was Peter. Simon suited up and raced to the location. When he found Alicia, he immediately got into a brutal fight with Peter. In the heat of the battle, Simon accidentally killed him. As Peter lay dying, he whispered to Simon that he saved his girlfriend, and that makes him a true superhero. With Peter's death, everything finally came to an end. Alicia urged Simon not to dwell on the past. She asked him to burn his costume along with Peter's body, to leave everything behind. Simon agreed at first, but as he was tossing the suit into the fire, he hesitated. In the end, he couldn't bring himself to destroy it. He hid the costume instead. Up until this moment, everything was still part of Peter's planned comic story. But from now on, the future was Simon's to write. Previously, Seth once mentioned that Curtis's time reversal ability had been purchased by an elderly Jewish man named Friedrich, who wanted to go back and assassinate Hitler. Now, Friedrich left a letter on his desk, explaining that he was traveling back to World War II to kill Hitler for the sake of his people. He wrote that if he failed, he hoped someone would remember that he at least tried. After paying his respects at a memorial, Friedrich activated his power and was transported back in time. When he came to his senses, he found himself standing in Hitler's office. Just as he was about to make his move, Hitler walked in. Friedrich tried to sneak up on him, but his age betrayed him. Hitler easily noticed and disarmed him, ultimately killing him with his own knife. After defeating Friedrich, Hitler discovered the smartphone he had dropped. As he curiously examined the strange device, Friedrich's power triggered again, rapidly pushing time forward. Through this, we learned that history had been rewritten. Nazi Germany reverse-engineered the smartphone's technology, made massive leaps in science, won World War II, and went on to rule the world. When Friedrich returned to the present, he found Britain under Nazi occupation. Nazi flags hung everywhere, and the memorial he had once visited had been replaced with a statue of Hitler. While processing the horror of it all, Friedrich spotted a familiar face. It's Seth, who was being dragged out of a car by Nazi soldiers. Friedrich himself was soon captured too, and the two of them were thrown into custody. But what about the others in this twisted new world? Kelly was still working at the rehabilitation center, which had now been converted into a Nazi base. There, we saw an old face, the guy with the cap who had died back in Season 1. Thanks to the altered history, he was still alive. Meanwhile, Sean had climbed the Nazi ranks and become a low-level officer. Drunk with power, he forced Alicia to become his secretary and even tried to coerce her into sleeping with him. Just as Sean was about to act, Simon, now a soldier under his command, walked in. Simon reported that Seth had been captured and handed Sean a letter. Excited by the news, Sean hurried off to meet Seth. The Nazis' goal was simple. They wanted to use Seth's ability to steal superpowers from others and transfer them to their own soldiers. Despite his reluctance, Seth was forced to comply under intense pressure. Kelly happened to witness a chilling scene, the extraction of a superpower from a prisoner. Peter, who had escaped earlier, was gunned down by the Nazis during his flight. Horrified, Kelly slipped away to a small tavern. Meanwhile, Curtis was still working at the tavern even after the timeline had changed. Both he and Kelly shared a secret. They were members of the Resistance. Learning about Seth's capture, Curtis realized how dangerous it would be if the Nazis gained full control of his powers. He handed Kelly a vial of poison, suggesting she use her access to slip it into Seth's food and end the threat. However, Kelly hesitated. After all, Seth wasn't one of the Nazis. He was just a victim like the rest of them. At this time, Rudy was still drifting aimlessly through life. But after the Nazis began a full-scale hunt for superpowered individuals, empowered now by Seth's abilities, Rudy quickly found himself a target. He barely escaped through a tiny window and fled to the tavern. Once Curtis confirmed Rudy wasn't a Nazi sympathizer, he welcomed him into the Resistance. One day, Kelly returned to the base as usual, preparing herself to poison Seth. At the same time, a Nazi officer arrived. Under his coercion, Seth was forced to transfer a new superpower to him. As a demonstration, the Nazi officer chose the guy with the cap as his test subject, freezing him solid like a popsicle. And just like that, the guy was sent to meet Jesus again. His cap life ended. Witnessing this brutal scene, Kelly realized she couldn't delay any longer. She had to kill Seth before more powers fell into Nazi hands. She steeled herself, ready to slip the poison into Seth's next meal. But before she could act, Seth, overwhelmed by guilt and despair, attempted to hang himself in his cell. Kelly, seeing that Seth was truly a good person at heart, rushed to get help. She and Simon, now a guard at the base, managed to save Seth just in time. Back at the tavern, Kelly told Curtis that the mission had failed. She believed that Seth, who would rather take his own life than serve the Nazis, must be a good person, and that they should break him out instead of killing him. Not long after, the Nazi officer recognized Seth's value and decided to transfer him to a more comfortable prison. Kelly overheard this plan. Acting quickly, she tipped off the Resistance, and they set up an ambush along the transfer route. After wiping out most of the escorting guards, Sean, realizing he was massively outgunned, turned and fled without looking back. The Resistance brought Seth back to the tavern. To prevent him from escaping, Kelly was assigned to guard him. That night, Seth and Kelly talked for hours, slowly building a mutual fondness. Meanwhile, Sean reported the ambush to the Nazi officer, who flew into a rage and ordered a full-scale, citywide manhunt. Sean eventually tracked the Resistance back to the tavern. While Curtis and Rudy distracted the Nazi soldiers with jokes and banter, Kelly hurried Seth into a secret underground room. Unfortunately, the hollow floor gave them away. Sean pointed his gun at the floor and gave them 3 seconds to come out, or he would open fire. Seth and Kelly had no choice but to surrender. As they emerged, Seth suddenly grabbed Sean tightly, giving Kelly a chance to escape. Seth, Curtis, and Rudy were all captured and brought back to the base. Seth was imprisoned next to Friedrich. When Seth realized who he was, Friedrich explained everything. He had bought the time reversal ability from Seth, traveled back in time to assassinate Hitler, and failed, dropping his smartphone in the process. That failure had changed history, allowing the Nazis to win. Friedrich begged Seth to take back the time reversal power and reset the timeline. At the same time, Sean stumbled across Friedrich's farewell letter and pieced together the truth. He quickly reported it to the Nazi officer. When the Nazi officer arrived at the prison, he witnessed Seth reclaiming the time reversal ability from Friedrich. Furious, he demanded Seth return the power, and then kill Friedrich to eliminate any loose ends. When Seth refused, the Nazi officer ordered Simon to shoot Friedrich. Simon hesitated, trembling with fear, until the Nazi officer grew impatient and shot Friedrich himself. Determined to destroy the time reversal power once and for all, the Nazi officer dragged Curtis into the cell and forced Seth to transfer the ability to him. The moment Seth complied, the Nazi officer shot Curtis dead. He wasn't about to risk anyone else possessing that power. Meanwhile, Kelly, still free, armed herself with 2 guns and stormed the Nazi base alone to rescue her friends. She first took down Sean, forcing him to release the prisoners. Along the way, she encountered Alicia and Simon, who, despite the altered timeline, had found their way back to each other. They decided to turn against the Nazis and help Kelly in her rescue mission. Together, they freed Seth and Rudy. On their way out, Seth explained to Kelly how Friedrich's time travel mistake had led to the Nazi victory. But before they could escape, the Nazi officer and his soldiers blocked their path. With no other choice, Kelly led the group in a desperate firefight. During the battle, Seth was hit by a stray bullet. As he lay dying, Seth revealed a crucial secret to Kelly. He had only pretended to transfer the time reversal ability to Curtis. The real power was still within him. Seth urged Kelly to go back in time and retrieve the smartphone. Taking advantage of a final kiss, he secretly passed the time reversal power to her. Without wasting a moment, Kelly activated the ability, traveling back to Hitler's office during World War II. At that moment, Hitler was fiddling with the smartphone. Kelly stormed in, beat him senseless, and grabbed the phone. She then used the ability again to return to the modern day and found that the timeline had finally been restored. Friedrich had merely mourned his loved ones and had never attempted to assassinate Hitler. Later, Kelly found Seth and told him how she had changed history. Seth, not wanting to bear the burden of such a dangerous power, asked Kelly to remove it from him permanently and to ensure no one else could ever claim it. Seth decided to transfer the ability to his pet lizard, effectively locking it away forever. As for Kelly, Seth graciously restored her old power, the rocket expert ability. With the chaos over, life returned to normal, though only Kelly knew that she had just saved the world. A few days later, Seth went to find Kelly while she was doing community service. As luck would have it, he ran straight into the rest of the main group. With his usual wild imagination, Rudy assumed Seth was there to steal their powers and immediately started a fight with him. Thankfully, Kelly showed up just in time to clear up the misunderstanding. Seth explained that he was simply there to ask Kelly out for drinks at the bar that night. It finally clicked for everyone. Seth and Kelly clearly had something smelly going on. Meanwhile, at a hospital, a man was visiting his girlfriend, Jane, who lay in a coma. After he left, her ventilator suddenly began to alarm. Coincidentally, the group was volunteering at the hospital that day. Hearing the alarm, Kelly wandered over out of curiosity. When she touched Jane's hand, something extraordinary happened. Their souls instantly swapped bodies. Now, with her spirit inside Kelly's body, Jane realized she could move freely again. Overcome with emotion, she rushed out to find her boyfriend, but couldn't catch up to him in time. Instead, she returned to the hospital and apologized to Kelly, who was now trapped in her vegetative body. It quickly became clear that Jane had awakened a new superpower, and she had no intention of switching back. Soon after, Jane went to her boyfriend's house, pretending to be an old classmate. Inside, her familiar habits triggered deep emotions in her boyfriend, who began to cry like a giant baby without knowing why. Seeing him so upset, Jane revealed her true identity by sharing secrets only the two of them would know. The man was finally convinced this really was his girlfriend. Back at home, Jane styled herself with her old hairstyle and wardrobe. Seeing Kelly's body now inhabited by his beloved, her boyfriend couldn't hold back his feelings any longer. Passion exploded between them like a spark to dry wood, and they rushed into bed to perform a hormone yoga session and rushed to finish it without 2 minutes. Meanwhile, at the rehabilitation center, a new counselor arrived, a sophisticated, charming woman. During a therapy session, she hit a nerve by guessing Rudy's childhood secret. He used to wet the bed as a teenager. Embarrassed and unable to control his powers, Rudy fled to the bathroom for his wet life. To avoid further humiliation, Rudy sent his clone outside while he stayed behind to explain the bedwetting incident to the counselor. After the session, the clone happened to find the counselor crying alone in her car. Feeling sorry for her, he climbed in and comforted her using words only but not muscles yet. This encounter sparked the counselor's interest in him. During their next session, the counselor turned up the heat, flirting shamelessly with Rudy, and even going so far as to give him a very personal hand massage under the table. Rudy was caught completely off guard by the unexpected favor. Later in the bathroom, the clone tried to cover up the evidence of their encounter. Rudy then joined him, excitedly confessing what had happened, though he couldn't resist whining about the counselor being too old and overly emotional. More importantly, Rudy stressed that his clone couldn't afford to be tied down in a relationship. Thus, Rudy decided to break up with the counselor, brutally telling her she was too old and too clingy. His words cut deep, leaving the counselor in tears. Unaware of the breakup, the clone eagerly went to find the counselor to ask her out for dinner, only to be slapped across the face. The counselor believed he was toying with her feelings. The next morning, Jane woke up and found her boyfriend missing. Guessing he had gone back to the hospital, she hurried there too. It turned out her boyfriend was struggling with his feelings. It felt strange being intimate with his girlfriend's soul inside a stranger's body. At Jane's bedside, her boyfriend wrestled with guilt and confusion. He felt she should return to her own body. However, Jane refused. She was sick of lying motionless in a hospital bed, and now that she had her freedom, she didn't care what happened to others. In fact, she even considered killing her old body to erase any lingering attachment. Horrified by her coldness, the boyfriend stormed out of the hospital room. Jane chased after him, but just then they ran into Simon and Alicia. Seeing what looked like Kelly arguing with a stranger, and unaware that her body had been taken over, Simon and Alicia drove the man away. Thus, Jane ended up returning to the rehabilitation center with them. When Alicia asked about the argument, argument, Jane brushed it off, raising Alicia's suspicions. Still longing to reconnect with her boyfriend, Jane found an opportunity to sneak away. Previously, Seth asked Kelly out for drinks at the bar, but at that time, Jane, who was inhabiting Kelly's body after the soul swap, was busy passionately reconnecting with her boyfriend, and naturally, she missed the date. Seth waited for ages, but Kelly never showed. The next day, he went to find her to ask why she stood him up. However, Jane rudely brushed him off and told him to get lost with his stinky butt. Kelly's sudden change in attitude left Seth totally confused. He had no idea what he had done wrong, so he turned to the others for answers. Alicia explained that earlier that morning, Kelly had gotten into a loud argument with a stranger at the hospital, but refused to say why. She suggested maybe it had something to do with Seth. At Seth's request, Alicia used her power to tap into Kelly's vision. All she saw was a mysterious woman crying in the hospital. Alicia mistakenly thought Kelly had been assaulted and hospitalized, so the group rushed over to find her. They located the hospital room, but lying in the bed was Jane's original body. Something felt off. Alicia used her power again, this time seeing a view of themselves through Kelly's eyes. Simon quickly pieced it together. Someone had swapped souls with Kelly. The group decided they had to find whoever was inhabiting Kelly's body. Just then, a nurse approached Seth, mistaking him for a family member. She told him that Jane's mother had agreed to pull the plug on her life support. Realizing that Kelly's soul would die along with Jane's body if they didn't act fast, Seth rushed back to the others. They quickly hatched a plan to secretly steal Jane's body and the ventilator from the hospital, hiding them at the rehabilitation center until they could fix everything. Meanwhile, Jane tried once again to visit her boyfriend, but he refused to see her. Dejected, she returned to the center and sat gloomily against the wall. Coincidentally, Rudy's clone, fresh off his own heartbreak, stumbled across her. Misery loves company, so the two found a spot to drink and vent. While Jane went to grab more booze, her phone rang. The clone picked up. It was Rudy on the line, urgently telling him that Kelly's body had been hijacked by another soul. The clone had to get Jane back to the center immediately, or Kelly would die. Realizing the urgency, the clone tricked Jane into coming back with him. When Jane arrived and saw her original body lying in a hospital bed, she knew she had been exposed. She grabbed a screwdriver and tried to kill Rudy's clone to cover her tracks. Luckily, the others arrived just in time to stop her. But things quickly got worse. Officer Sean showed up to check on the commotion. Spotting an easier target, Jane stabbed Sean and bolted. Fortunately, the group had locked all the doors in advance. Seth cornered her before she could escape. Looking into Kelly's face, Seth's emotions poured out. He told Jane that he and Kelly had a chance at something real, that by stealing Kelly's body, Jane might have saved herself but destroyed 2 other people. Hearing the pain in his voice, Jane finally realized the damage she had caused. She agreed to return Kelly's soul to her body, but on one condition: Seth had to bring her boyfriend to see her one last time. Meanwhile, Sean lay critically wounded, and the group faced another problem. They couldn't call an ambulance. The police would never believe a soul swap story, and Kelly would end up behind bars. As Sean lay dying, confused about why Kelly had stabbed him, Simon finally revealed that they all had superpowers and explained the soul swap. To prove it, Rudy and his clone even merged into one right before Sean's eyes. At last, Sean understood everything before passing away peacefully. As promised, Jane gave Kelly back her body. Seth also kept his word, bringing her boyfriend to say goodbye. Seeing his girlfriend in a coma again, the man broke down in tears. After a tearful farewell, he honored Jane's final wish. He shut off the ventilator while sobbing uncontrollably. Witnessing Jane and her boyfriend's tragic love story made Kelly cherish her own feelings for Seth even more. The two finally confessed their love and tongue massaged passionately. With no more supervisors to hold them back, the group was free to indulge in their antics. One day, Rudy attended a party where he hooked up with a party girl. Before heading to the bedroom, she told him she wasn't looking for a one-night stand and asked him to call her the next day if he was serious about dating her. With lust clouding his judgment, Rudy agreed without hesitation. However, after their smelly workout, Rudy got dressed and immediately pretended like he didn't know her. Angrily, the party girl used her powers on Rudy's swollen sausage, but since Rudy was drunk and barely aware of what was happening, he didn't even notice. The next day, Rudy bragged to the group about his wild night, only to find the party girl's phone number in his pocket. But unwilling to take responsibility, he ripped it up and threw it away. Little did he know, karma would strike quickly. While using the bathroom, Rudy noticed something wrong with his sausage. At the same time, Simon's precognitive abilities kicked in, and he saw a future where Rudy's privates fell to the ground and got crushed into mashed potato. Rushing to warn him, Simon arrived just in time to help. Realizing the situation was dire, Rudy asked Simon to help find the party girl. They tried to reconstruct the phone number from memory, but the last few digits remained a mystery. With no other choice, Rudy racked his brain, recalling that he had flirted with 3 girls the night before. So, he and Simon headed back to the party venue to look for clues. The scene was a mess, but Rudy spotted a girl on the bed and a stethoscope on the floor, a piece of the puzzle. He thought he'd found the right girl, woke her up, apologized, and promised to be her boyfriend. But to his surprise, the girl told him they hadn't hooked up the night before. This left Rudy frustrated and confused. Fortunately, Simon found another lead. He spotted a photo of Rudy with a woman on the desk. Asking around, they managed to track down her address. When they arrived at her door, Rudy swore he'd make her regret rejecting him, but it turned out she was a lesbian, and they had only kissed when she was drunk. Realizing his mistake, Rudy quickly fled, only to be met outside by Simon, who suggested a new plan. Before they could strategize, the woman's sister, frightened by the unexpected visitors, called the police. Rudy was arrested and taken to the station. Inside the interrogation room, Rudy's clone came up with a plan. Rudy would merge with him, and while the police took the clone away, Rudy could use his powers to escape. Once out of the station, Rudy bumped into Simon, who had uncovered a new discovery. The paper Rudy had been carrying was actually a nightclub flyer. Simon believed the woman frequented this club, so the pair headed there. Sure enough, they found the party girl. Excited to fix his problem, Rudy begged her to undo the damage to his sausage. But seeing his careless attitude, the party girl refused. She had only used her powers to punish those who played with her feelings. Calling Rudy a jerk, she turned to walk away. Determined to make things right, Rudy decided to go all in. He climbed onto the stage in front of the entire club and confessed. He admitted that he'd treated women poorly out of fear that people would discover he was actually a jerk. His usual carefree attitude was just a mask. Deep down, he longed for true love but was too afraid to get hurt. He apologized sincerely to all the women he had hurt. Moved by his heartfelt apology, the party girl decided to give him another chance. Overwhelmed with joy, Rudy's sausage returned to normal, and everything seemed to be back on track. A little while earlier, after Rudy had finished bragging about his party experience, the group noticed an ice cream truck nearby. Curtis, craving ice cream, ran over to buy some. The truck's owner was a stunning woman, and she was incredibly warm and friendly toward Curtis, clearly interested in him. Just then, something strange happened. Curtis's powers suddenly went haywire, and he instantly turned into a woman. Realizing he wasn't going to hook up now, he reluctantly headed back to the rehabilitation center with Rudy, who had come along to buy ice cream. On the way back, Curtis couldn't stop thinking about what triggered his power failure. Meanwhile, Kelly had gone off to meet Seth for a date, leaving only Curtis and Alicia at the center. As noon approached, Curtis and Alicia were playing table football when his transformation happened again. He told Alicia that besides his powers acting up, his chest had been hurting lately. Alicia suggested he take a pregnancy test, and to their shock, it turned out he was indeed pregnant. Completely stunned, neither of them had a clue who the father could be. After thinking for a while, Curtis suddenly recalled that the baby might be his own. It turned out that the previous day, after a little solo indulgence, he'd transformed into a woman and had some more fun, even using the same piece of paper to clean up afterward. No wonder he ended up pregnant. However, his transformation took a turn for the worse. Not only did he turn into a woman again, but now he couldn't change back into a man, and his mental state collapsed. On the other hand, Seth and Kelly's relationship had been heating up, and they were inseparable. After a 2-minute fast yoga session, Seth went to the bathroom and happened upon a pregnancy test that Curtis had left behind. Seth rushed to Alicia to ask if she was pregnant, and upon hearing her denial, he immediately assumed that Kelly must be the one expecting. Seth confronted Kelly, determined to take responsibility for the child, but Kelly vehemently denied it. Relieved, Seth received a phone call just then. Someone told him that the item he wanted had arrived, and it seemed incredibly important. He quickly ended the call and said goodbye to Kelly before leaving the center. After meeting with the person on the phone, Seth paid for and received the item. To his surprise, it was a superpowered individual. However, Seth didn't kill him. Instead, he took the person's ability, the power of resurrection. Seth intended to use this power to bring his ex-girlfriend back to life. Meanwhile, Curtis, while looking in the mirror, noticed his belly starting to swell, and a strong sense of unease filled him. He went to Seth to explain the whole situation and asked him to take away his powers. Seth listened carefully and said he could help, but in exchange, he wanted Curtis to take the resurrection ability so he could bring back his ex. Although Curtis felt guilty about what it might do to Kelly, the urgency of the situation led him to accept Seth's offer. In a flash of white light, Curtis became a man again, and his new power was resurrection. Here's a quick explanation. Seth needed Curtis to use the resurrection ability because, while he could take and give superpowers, he couldn't use someone else's ability himself. At the right time, Curtis showed up, so Seth naturally asked for his help. In this episode, Curtis ends up pregnant with his own child, and the way it happened is certainly outrageous. The takeaway here is that, after indulging, always wash your hands and dispose of any used tissues properly, or you might end up with an unexpected child. It's hard to top Curtis's outrageous situation, getting pregnant from his own actions. As for Seth, his plan to use Curtis to transfer the resurrection power in hopes of reviving his ex is bold, but if it succeeds, Seth could potentially bring anyone back to life. Lucky for him, this is happening in a place with common burial practices like in the UK, otherwise his ex might have already turned to ashes, making the plan impossible. Back to the story, after the deal was made, Seth took Curtis to the cemetery, where he casually dug up his ex's body. Looking at the foul-smelling, desiccated corpse of his ex, both Seth and Curtis were forced to step back, gagging. Curtis couldn't help but ask Seth if he was sure about this. Despite the situation, Seth insisted, so Curtis stepped forward and activated the power. A few seconds later, the corpse began to transform, and soon, Seth's ex-girlfriend, Shannon, was fully restored to life, her body now alive and healthy. Seth brought Shannon home, but she felt disoriented, as if everything around her was foreign and unpleasant. It wasn't until she saw a lizard in a water tank that a strange feeling of familiarity washed over her. Seth explained everything that had happened, assuring her that as time passed, things would return to normal. The scene shifts back to Curtis. Even though the probation officer was gone, his sentence still wasn't over. On his way to the rehabilitation center, he saw an elderly woman holding her cat. It turned out the cat had been hit by a car and had died. Feeling pity for the woman, Curtis lied and told her he was a veterinarian. Using his powers, he resurrected the cat. In gratitude, the woman gave him a cake, but she was particularly fond of the cake box. Curtis promised to return the box after he ate the cake. After this small detour, Curtis arrived at the rehabilitation center, where everyone was gathered by the window watching something outside. A group of cheerleaders had come for training, and their flashy dance moves had both Curtis and Simon excited. However, Rudy seemed repulsed by the sight of the cheerleaders. This struck Simon as odd. It turned out that when Rudy was younger, he had once witnessed his mom, dressed in a cheerleader outfit, passionately getting it on with his dad. Ever since then, he had developed a form of cheerleader PTSD, a pretty funny twist. Soon after, Seth suddenly called Kelly out for a meeting and told her he wanted to break up. After Shannon's resurrection, Seth had to choose between her and Kelly. Feeling guilty over Shannon's death, which had been caused by his actions, Seth decided to end things with Kelly. Kelly was furious, yelling at him to get out with his unwiped butt. Meanwhile, as Curtis was returning the cake box, he sensed something was off. Concerned that the elderly woman might be in trouble, he cautiously entered the house. To his horror, he found her lying on the floor, a chunk of flesh missing from her face, with the cat gnawing at her wound. When the cat noticed Curtis, it hissed and charged at him, forcing him to retreat into the bathroom in fear. He immediately called the others for help. Upon learning that Curtis was in danger, the group rushed to the woman's house, armed and ready. By the time they arrived, the cat had disappeared, so they took the opportunity to rescue Curtis. After hearing about the terrifying scene, Curtis led them into the house to find the cat. The cat had become much more aggressive, but Simon cleverly used a blanket to trap it. They considered killing the cat to prevent further danger, but ultimately, no one could bring themselves to do it. Rudy couldn't resist making a sarcastic remark, saying they guys have no problem killing all those probation officers, but they can't bring themselves to kill a cat. He grabbed a hammer and prepared to strike, but just then, the elderly woman suddenly regained consciousness. She lunged at Rudy like a mad cow. In a split second, Curtis swung the hammer and struck her, sending her straight to her tomb. At this point, everyone started to realize that something was off. Simon deduced from the elderly woman's transformation that anyone resurrected by Curtis turned into creatures similar to the zombies from Daniel C.C. zombie movies. They attacked both humans and animals, and anyone bitten would become one of them. Kelly suddenly remembered Shannon's resurrection and realized that Seth was in danger. She quickly ran out to warn him. Meanwhile, Seth was at home with Shannon. He noticed that his pet lizard was missing and he couldn't find it anywhere. Just then, Kelly arrived and told him everything that had just happened. Seth thought Kelly was just making things up, trying to drive a wedge between him and Shannon. Shannon overheard and found out for the first time that Seth and Kelly had once been romantically involved. Believing that Seth had cheated on her, Shannon stormed off to her room in anger. What Seth didn't know was that Shannon had actually become a zombie. To avoid hurting Seth, she had used the lizard as a substitute. Back in her room, she began feeding on the lizard, but one wasn't enough for long. Not long after, she finished the lizard and went in search of her next meal. Just as she was about to attack, the doorbell rang. It was the neighbor who had come to check on Seth. Seth had just stepped out, and Shannon, desperate for fresh blood, lured the neighbor inside, only to attack him when his guard was down. Soon after, Kelly returned with the others. They knew that Shannon would eventually kill someone, so they decided to act preemptively. When Seth saw the group approaching, he thought Kelly was there for revenge against Shannon, so he grabbed her and hid inside the neighbor's house. The others, armed with baseball bats, were ready to make a move, but Rudy, always thinking outside the box, brought along a massive sledgehammer. This choice left everyone speechless. They knocked on Seth's door, but no one answered. That's when the sledgehammer came into play. Rudy swung it with all his might, but the first blow was completely useless. Several more swings later, the door looked like the surface of the moon, yet it still wouldn't open. Curtis grabbed the hammer and delivered a single powerful blow. The group rushed into the house, only to find it empty. They had no choice but to leave and rethink their plan. Meanwhile, Seth, hiding in the neighbor's house, listened carefully for any movement. Once he heard the group leave, he sighed in relief. But just then, the neighbor began to transform. As the neighbor lunged at Seth, Shannon stepped in and killed him with a well-aimed blow to the head. Unable to hide the truth any longer, Shannon confessed to Seth that she had indeed become a zombie. She had been fighting the urge to kill, but the neighbor had been one of her victims. Seth couldn't believe it, so he went out for a walk to clear his mind and come up with a plan. When he returned home, he found Shannon staring hungrily at a nearby child. Seth knew that if he didn't do something, things would spiral out of control. That night, he crept to her bedside, ready to end her life, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. Feeling hopeless, Seth secretly went to Curtis, hoping they could team up and take down Shannon together. Meanwhile, the group still hadn't dealt with the zombie cat. They decided to lock it in a cage and bring it back to the rehabilitation center. After returning from Seth's house, they decided to draw straws to see who would take responsibility for killing the cat. Simon drew the short straw. When he went to deal with the cat, he discovered that the cage had been chewed open. Realizing the situation was critical, he quickly alerted the group, and they began searching the rehabilitation center for the zombie cat. Unfortunately, the cheerleading squad had just finished training and was changing in the locker room. The zombie cat followed the scent and attacked the cheerleaders. When the group arrived at the locker room, they found it resembling a scene from hell, with the cheerleaders attacking and biting each other, diabetic blood everywhere. The group had no choice but to go on a zombie cheerleader hunt and take them down one by one. Eventually, only one zombie cheerleader remained. Just then, the new probation officer arrived at the center. As soon as she stepped through the door, she was attacked by the zombies, and the group rushed to deal with her. Seeing the officer about to turn into a zombie, Rudy stepped in and ended her zombie life. The fourth probation officer had barely lasted a day, setting a record for the shortest-lived one yet. The group loaded the pile of corpses into the back of a car, planning to dispose of the bodies. As Kelly went to get tools, Shannon suddenly appeared. It turned out that Seth had finally given up on her, and in revenge, Shannon intended to attack Kelly and turn her into a sexy zombie. Luckily, Seth showed up just in time and ended their twisted relationship, burying her once again. After handling all this chaos, the group celebrated their victory with drinks, toasting to their success in preventing a zombie outbreak. But just as they were about to relax, Curtis suddenly remembered they still hadn't dealt with that damn zombie cat. The scene shifts to a medium arriving at the rehabilitation center. It's said that he can communicate with the dead and deliver messages from them to the living. While the medium was performing his act, Simon happened to pass by and was dragged into a demonstration. The medium immediately called out for the dead probation officer, Sally, and asked Simon why he had done what he did. Terrified, Simon fled. After he ran off, he spotted a familiar figure in the distance. When he caught up, it turned out to be none other than Sally. After seeing Simon, she disappeared through a door. That night, Kelly went to meet Seth for a date, and by chance, they encountered a customer looking to buy supernatural abilities. After the recent zombie crisis, Kelly hoped Seth would be more cautious when selling powers and ask about the customer's intentions. Seth, however, didn't take her concerns seriously, and the two ended up having an argument and parting on bad terms. The next day, Sally found Simon in the bathroom again. She told him that it was the medium who had brought her back to life. Sally also apologized for her past actions and expressed a desire to reconcile. Just then, Alicia showed up and interrupted their conversation. Simon then shared the news of Sally's resurrection with the rest of the group. At that moment, the medium appeared. The group scoffed at his supernatural antics, and Kelly pointed out that he was just another storm-affected ability user. Realizing the jig was up, the medium admitted that his ability allowed him to bring souls with unfinished business into the physical world. He then casually asked about Sally's obsession with Simon, which Simon tried to avoid talking about. The medium, not missing a beat, used his powers to summon Sally for a chat. However, to everyone's surprise, he accidentally summoned the leader of the virtue cult instead. Initially, the group was terrified, worried that they might be brainwashed again, but soon realized that the virtue leader's spirit had returned with a completely different attitude. After dying, she found that the afterlife was nothing like she had imagined, and her faith collapsed. Determined to change things up, she decided to come back as a bad girl to see what it felt like. After things settled down, Seth came back and took Kelly to the superpower store, telling her that he had shut it down and wanted to use the money they earned to go on vacation together. After they reconciled, of course, they celebrated with some hormone yoga time. The next day, glowing with the after effects of love, Kelly showed up at the center and was shocked to run into their first probation officer, Tony. She freaked out and ran away immediately. Meanwhile, the virtue leader had started her dramatic transformation. She was sitting with the others, having drinks and chatting, getting a bit tipsy. Suddenly, she felt a strong urge to make a move on Curtis. Like a tiger pouncing on its prey, she leaped at him and began getting intimate with him. Just then, Kelly burst in and told everyone that Officer Tony had also been resurrected and was chasing her, just like before. What followed felt like a reenactment of the first episode. The group quickly turned and fled, and Tony charged in through another door. Kelly tried to knock him out, but Tony pushed her aside. He took the chance to explain that he wasn't back for revenge, and the craziness before had been caused by a strange superpower. He was now fully lucid. After the misunderstanding was cleared up, the group told Tony that his girlfriend Sally had also been brought back. Tony asked where she was, but they had no clue where she had disappeared to. Meanwhile, Sally was having a heart-to-heart with Simon. To keep her return a secret, Simon took her home after their chat. While Simon was in the bathroom, Sally spotted a picture of Simon and Alicia together, realizing they were in a relationship. When Simon came back, Sally confessed that she had genuinely liked him before, not just used him. Hearing this, Simon suddenly had a vision of himself and Sally in a passionate embrace, and he blurted it out in surprise. Sally got up and tried to make a move on him, but Simon resisted, telling her that he was with Alicia now. However, Sally insisted that only if they slept together could she find peace and be freed from her torment. Feeling guilty about having killed her in the past, Simon ultimately didn't resist and was pushed onto the bed by Sally for a forced tongue massage. What Simon didn't know was that Sally had secretly recorded their encounter and soon sent the footage to Alicia. Alicia, enraged, stormed off to confront Simon. He tried to explain, but Alicia was too furious to listen. She turned and left the locker room, and Simon rushed after her, only to run into Tony. Still unaware that Tony had regained his sanity, Simon grabbed a fire extinguisher and swung it at him. Fortunately, Tony was tough enough to survive the hit, and after the group explained the situation, the misunderstanding was cleared up. But Simon's biggest concern was still Alicia. Alicia had gone up to the rooftop to be alone, not realizing that Sally was already waiting there. When Alicia saw Sally, she demanded to know why she had done this. Sally explained that her desire for revenge had never stopped, and she believed that the group had killed her boyfriend Tony. She wanted Simon to experience the pain of losing everything, so she tried to push Alicia off the rooftop. Thankfully, Simon and Tony arrived just in time. Tony explained to Sally that it was actually him who had lost control and attacked them first, and the group had only acted in self-defense. With the misunderstanding cleared, Sally let go of Alicia and rushed to embrace Tony. The long-separated couple shared a tight kiss, passionate but too fast, and in a flash of white light, they disappeared, seemingly finding peace and release after resolving their emotional turmoil. Afterward, Simon explained to Alicia that he never wanted to sleep with Sally. She had tricked him into thinking it was the only way to be freed from her torment, and he had only given in out of guilt. Even then, in his heart, Simon had only been thinking about Alicia. Hearing Simon's explanation, Alicia forgave him, and they reconciled. Later, when they returned, Alicia pulled Simon aside to a quiet spot for some alone time. Meanwhile, Rudy noticed the virtue leader sitting alone in a corner, quietly crying. It turned out that everyone had returned to the real world because of their obsessions. Once their wishes were fulfilled, they would disappear. The virtue leader believed her obsession was to break the taboos of her faith, but after smoking, drinking, and exercising with men, nothing had changed. This meant that her true wish wasn't to be bad after all. Next, the virtue leader spotted a small knife on the table and suddenly realized the purpose of her return: revenge. She then found the main group and accused accused them of killing her and turning her into a bad girl. Seeing that she was holding a knife, the group hesitated to approach. Just then, Alicia and Simon finished their workout and walked out from the side. The virtue leader swiftly turned the knife and slashed it across Alicia's neck. In that instant, her revenge was complete, her wish fulfilled. She vanished in a flash of white light. Alicia collapsed into Simon's arms, clutching her neck as blood poured from her wound, slowly fading into silence. Simon couldn't accept the death of the woman he loved most. He sought out Seth, hoping to use the same ability Curtis had to travel back in time. The power had been in a pet lizard, but the lizard had been eaten previously. Now, the only thing available was a time travel ability that could only go one way, into the past, but not back to the present. Simon didn't hesitate. He was willing to take the risk for Alicia. However, when he returned to the past, Alicia's superpower was still active, and Simon couldn't even touch her, no matter how much he tried. Seth came up with a solution. He privately sponsored Simon with $10,000 to help him go back and trade with his past self. At the time, Seth had an ability that made him immune to all other powers. If Simon could acquire it, it would solve the problem. Simon was grateful and thanked Seth profusely. After burying Alicia, Simon returned to the past and successfully obtained the immunity power. The timeline of the 3 seasons finally came full circle at this moment. This season ends here. What remains to be seen is whether Simon, upon returning to the past again, will bravely face death once more or come up with a different way to save his beloved. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.